the security standards with examples. I mean,
Administrative technical safeguards.
security standards with examples. Olsun katkı yapmak.
Technical'ga password security logs bo'lsa kerak. Physical safeguards'ga
Bu mana bu physical bo'ladi, to'g'rimi? Chunki bu doors, screenshot, screen lock, savers and fireproofs.
okay.
Mana bu
Technical'ga bo'ladi.
va mana bu esa administrator bo'ladi. Qani norozilar shu yerda aytsin. Men noroziman, qarshiman deganlar bormi?
No.
Anybody has any questions about this? To'g'rimi? Hamma to'g'ri bo'lishi kerak, a?
I think so.
Okay, поехали. Yay, so far so good. The security rule allows covered entities and business associates to take into account their size, complexity, and capabilities, their technical infrastructure, hardware, and software security capabilities, the cost of security measures, the probability and criticality of potential risk to EPHI, the access to and use of EPHI, or all of the above.
All of the above.
Which one is it?
Oxirgisi, menimcha.
I think that last one, right? That is correct. Congratulations, you passed the passing score 75 and detail report, blah, blah, blah. Bu 100%. Hammasiga to'g'ri javob berdik, dars ketamiz. Bu birinchi nimasi. You guys ready?
Lesson 2, Administrative Safeguards. This lesson provides a detailed introduction to the HIPAA security administrative safeguards.
Next basket.
Administrative safeguards. The administrative safeguards are administrative actions, policies, and procedures to manage the selection, development, implementation, and maintenance of security measures to protect EPHI and to manage the conduct of the organization's workforce in relation to the protection of that information. The administrative safeguards consist of the following 9 standards: security management process, assigned security responsibility, workforce security, information access management, security awareness and training, security incident procedures, contingency plan, evaluation, business associate contracts. Examples of administrative safeguards are assigning a security officer, security awareness training, internal audits, contingency plans for emergencies, procedures for reporting security incidents. Security management process. The security management process standard requires an organization to implement policies and procedures to prevent, detect, contain, and correct security violations. Risk analysis. Conduct an accurate and thorough assessment of the potential risks and vulnerabilities to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of EPHI. Risk management. Implement security measures sufficient to reduce risks and vulnerabilities to a reasonable and appropriate level. Sanction policy. Apply appropriate sanctions against workforce members and business associates who fail to comply with security policies and procedures. Information system activity review. Implement procedures to regularly review records of information system activity, such as audit logs, access reports, and security incident tracking reports. Note: the risk analysis and sanction policy must be documented, retained for 6 years, and should be periodically reassessed and updated as needed. Assigned security responsibility. For the assigned security responsibility standard, the organization must designate a security official, one individual, not an organization, to be responsible for the development and implementation of the policies and procedures and having overall responsibility for the security of the organization's EPHI. If an organization has a dedicated IT department, then the best candidate to be the HIPAA security officer would be a manager or director from IT. If the organization does not have a dedicated IT department, the HIPAA privacy officer would be the best candidate for the HIPAA security officer. Workforce security. The Workforce Security Standard requires an organization to implement policies and procedures to ensure that all members of its workforce have appropriate access to electronic protected health information, EPHI, and includes the following implementation specifications: authorization and/or supervision. Procedures for the authorization and/or supervision of workforce members who work with EPHI or in locations where it might be accessed. Workforce clearance procedure. Procedures to determine that the access of a workforce member to EPHI is appropriate. Termination procedures. Procedures for terminating access to EPHI when the employment of a workforce member ends or when the clearance procedures determine that a change in a worker's access privileges is appropriate. Note: clearance does not mean that there is a blanket requirement for background checks or other formal security vetting before access to PHI is granted. Clearance means that access to PHI will be conditioned on assessments of job responsibilities, the amount and type of supervision, and so on. Information access management. The Information Access Management Standard requires an organization to implement policies and procedures for authorizing access to EPHI only when such access is appropriate, based on the user's or recipient's role-based access, and includes the following implementation specifications: isolation of healthcare clearinghouse function. If a healthcare clearinghouse is part of a larger organization, it must take steps to protect its EPHI from unauthorized access by persons from that larger organization. Access authorization. Policies and procedures that specify levels of access for all personnel authorized to access EPHI. Access establishment and modification. Policies and procedures to specify how access to EPHI is granted and modified. Note: if an organization is part of a larger organization that utilizes the same corporate information technology infrastructure, the organization must take steps to protect its EPHI from unauthorized access by persons working in other functions and departments. Information access management. General guidelines when developing different levels of information access are: restrict access rights to the minimum necessary. Define types of users, roles, and access labels. Verify the identity of individuals who attempt to access information. Establish criteria for when access rights should change. Never allow access rights to be transferred among users. Communicate policies to every person that has access to EPHI. Review policies and procedures annually. Information Access Management Case Study. Scenario: Steve and Mark work at the same outsourced medical billing agency. Steve's primary responsibilities are internal administrative functions, while Mark's responsibilities are directly related to patient billing. During a staff meeting, Sarah, the administrator, told them that because of the HIPAA security rule, Steve and Mark would have to have different levels of access to patient electronic health information. Question: is Sarah correct in having different levels of access to patient health information for Steve and Mark? Answer: access to EPHI should be limited to those persons who require legitimate access to perform their job functions. Since Mark requires access to EPHI to perform his job function and Steve does not, Mark should have access to EPHI and Steve should not. Security and awareness training. The security awareness and Answer: Access to EPHI should be limited to those persons who require legitimate access to perform their job functions. Since Mark requires access to EPHI to perform his job function and Steve does not, Mark should have access to EPHI and Steve should not. Security and awareness. Answer.
So, tushundik albatta. Steve bilan Markni o'sha billing agentsiyaga ishlashi. Steve's primary responsibility is internal administrative function, while Mark's responsibility directly are related to patient billing. During the staff meeting, Sarah, the administrator, told them that because of the HIPAA security rule, Steve and Mark would have to have a different level of access to patient electronic health information. Bunga nima deb o'ylaysiz? Sarah to'g'ri aytyaptimi? Sarahga qo'shilasizmi? Nima qaroriga? Ya, Sarah to'g'ri gapiryapti, to'g'rimi? Chunki hammani ham bir xil nimasi yo'q. Hammani o'ziga yarasha mas'uliyati bor. Steve nimalar bilan ishlash mumkin? Markka balkim Steve ko'radigan narsani Mark ko'rish shart bo'lmasdi. Shuni aytyapti.
Security and awareness training. The Security Awareness and Training Standard requires an organization to train all members of their workforce on its security policies and procedures and includes the following implementation specifications. Security reminders. Provide periodic reminders, see note, to supplement initial security education. Protection from malicious software. Provide training on guarding against detecting and reporting malicious software. Login monitoring. Provide training on monitoring login attempts and reporting discrepancies. Password management. Provide training on procedures for creating, changing, and safeguarding passwords. Note, reminders could be an internal memo or a posting on company bulletin boards or the company intranet. Security incident procedures. The Security Incident Procedures Standard requires an organization to implement policies and procedures to address security incidents, the attempted or successful unauthorized access, use, disclosure, modification, or destruction of information, or interference with systems operations in an information system, and includes the following single implementation specification. Response and reporting. Develop policies and procedures to identify and respond to suspected or known security incidents. Mitigate to the extent practical harmful effects of security incidents that are known to the organization. Document security incidents and their outcomes. Note, the security incident procedures relate to internal reporting of security incidents and do not specifically require the organization to report the incident to any outside entity, except if they are dependent upon business or legal considerations. Security Incident Procedures Case Study. Scenario. Tamara was recently appointed to be the HIPAA Security Officer for Grasco Tech, Inc. One of her responsibilities was to develop a security incident procedure. She has developed a list of what constitutes a security incident as well as a form for reporting the incidents. Question. What should Tamara do with the reports of security incidents once they've been filed with her office?
Hey, nobody up. Tamara. Nobody up Tamara bilan. Bilamizmi nima qilganimiz, nima qiladimi? Anybody knows?
Answer. Whenever a security incident occurs, the security officer and their team should investigate the incident and mitigate, to the extent practical, any harmful effects of the security incident, and document the security incidents and their outcomes. This documentation should be retained in the organization's file for a minimum of 6 years. It may also require that you notify the Department of Health and Human Services if the breach involves a large number of people affected. Contingency Plan. The Contingency Plan standard requires an organization to implement policies and procedures for responding to an emergency or other occurrence. For example, fire, vandalism, system failure, and natural disaster that damages systems that contain EPHI and includes the following implementation specifications. Data backup plan. Establish and implement procedures to create and maintain retrievable exact copies of an EPHI. Disaster recovery plan. Establish and implement procedures to restore any loss of data following a catastrophe. Emergency mode operation plan. Establish and implement procedures to enable continuation of critical business processes for protection of the security of EPHI while operating in emergency mode. Testing and revision procedure. Establish and implement procedures for periodic testing and revision of contingency plans. Applications and data criticality analysis. Must perform an analysis to assess the relative criticality of specific applications and data in support of other contingency plan components. Note, data backups should be kept off-site to protect them from fire, flood, or other disaster at the facility.
Okay.
Contingency plan case study. Scenario. Sarah is the office manager for a healthcare agency. The agency's IT group has a policy and procedure to back up all of the servers each night and store the tapes off-site. Sarah is wondering if the IT group's policy and procedures will satisfy the security rules data backup plan implementation standard. Question. As her HIPAA security consultant, what would you tell Sarah?
Hadi bolalar ovoz chiqyaptimi orqadan? Kimdan chiqyapti?
Mendan hozir anaqa qilaman.
Endi qarang, savol beryapti. Sara office manager healthcare agensiyasidagi manager ekan, to'g'rimi? IT kompaniya timi gruppasida nima bo'lishi kerak? Policy bo'lishi kerak. Backup serverlarni har kuni kechqurun tape'ga off-site qilish kerak. Store qilish kerak. Sara o'ylanyaptiki, shu mana shu hozirgi bor prosedura va protokollar yetarlimikan? O'sha nimani standartlarga yetarli javob beradigan darajadamikan degan ma'no beryapti. Endi savol o'ylanyapti. So nima deb o'ylaysiz? Shu Sarani o'ylashiga siz ham qo'shilasizmi? Nasiba, siz anaqani o'chirib qo'ysangiz, mikrofoningiz biz eshitmay qolamiz, chunki sizdan chiqyapti.
Restoration purposes.
Bo'ldi mana. Qo'shildi.
Okay. Demak, bit aytyaptiki, implementation of specification for data backup plan is satisfied by the IT department. Backup policy and procedure. Backup should be maintained off-site until the data is needed for restoration purposes. Mana sizga bitta savol beraman. Nima uchun mana shu backupni off-site'da saqlaymiz deyapti? Ya'ni kim bitta javob bilan qoniqtirgan darajada javob beradi. Nima uchun backuplar off-site'da saqlanishi kerak? Qani? Kim javob bera oladi? Nima uchun backuplar off-site'da saqlanishi kerak?
Bu degani cloud drive'dami?
Ha?
Outside degani bu haligi havodagi cloud drive'mi?
Yo'q, cloud'dami yoki tashqaridagi off-site'dami? Off-site degani o'sha joyda emas degani. Anywhere outside. Anywhere. Cloud'da bo'lishi mumkin, yaqindagi naridagi binoda bo'lishi mumkin, lekin o'sha kompyuterlar, serverlar turgan joyda emas. Nima uchun? Bitta sabab. Qani?
Security kuchayadi-da, agar ikkalasi bitta joyda bo'lsa, bitta joyga virus tushsa, ikkalasi ham ketadi. Ikkalasi ikkita joyda bo'lsa, bitta joyga virus tushsa, ikkinchi joy qoladi-da.
Okay, sal qo'shilaman, lekin 100% qo'shilmayman. Yana variantlar bormi?
Agar kompyuterda bo'lsa, kompyuter biron-bir muammoga uchrab qolsa, tashlab yuborishga majbur bo'lib qolsa, o'shaning uchundir-da. Ma'lumotlar tashqariga chiqib ketadi-ku, tashlab yuborgan taqdirda.
Bu ham sal bor, lekin mana xayolingiz, ko'zingiz oldiga bitta binoni keltiring-da. Binoning ichida hamma o'sha kompyuter serverlar bor va uning ichida ishlaydi odamlar, to'g'rimi? Endi bu yerda ularni har bitta kompyuterning serverlarini o'z backup qilishingiz kerak. Bitta o nimalarni, mijozlarni va patients nima deydi, tabib bemorlarni ma'lumotlari bor-da, masalan. Endi agar sizning backupingiz ham o'sha bir xil kompyuterlar turgan binoda turgan bo'lsa, ertaga bino yonib ketsa, yo suv bosib ketsa, yo bir narsa bo'lsa, sizning backupingiz ham birga ketadi-yu. To'g'rimi?
Ha.
Bo'ldi. Demak, birinchi o'rinda biz safety, ya'ni o'sha ma'lumotlarni shunday joyda saqlaydikki, чтобы ertaga kompyuterlarimizga bir narsa bo'lganda, zato bizda backupimiz boshqa joyda. Ya'ni sog'omon, hech qanaqa nima tekkan yo'q. Shuning uchun cloudda yoki nimadan o'sha binodan uzoqroq joylarda. Ya'ni yonib ketsa, bir qanaqadir tasodifiy anaqalar bo'lib qolsa, bizda backupimiz bor.
Evaluation. For the evaluation standard, the organization must perform periodic technical and non-technical evaluations that determine the extent to which the organization meets the ongoing requirements of the security rule. The organization must verify adherence to the HIPAA security rule, verify that the necessary policies and procedures have been developed, verify that employees have been trained, verify that contingency plans are in place, verify that adequate access rights are in place, periodically evaluate computer systems and/or network design to ensure proper security has been applied. Business associate contracts case study. Scenario: a hospital subcontracts its billing and collections to a third-party medical billing and collections agency. Question: what should the hospital do to ensure that patients' PHI is protected?
Hospital subcontract is billing and collections to third-party medical billing and the collection agency. What should the hospital do to ensure the patient's PHI protected? Let's see the job.
Answer: the hospital should enter into a business associate contract with the medical billing and collections agency before sharing PHI with the agency. The hospital is required by HIPAA to do some due diligence to ensure that the business associate is actually HIPAA compliant. That can be done over the phone by asking a few simple questions, such as, do they provide their staff a HIPAA awareness training? Do they have a HIPAA compliance officer? Do they have a compliance binder for both HIPAA privacy and HIPAA security that could be inspected, etc.? Finally, the hospital will make the medical billing and collections agency legally responsible for the PHI they receive by having them sign a business associate contract. The hospital and the agency is then required to keep that contract in their HIPAA compliance documentation. Lesson 2 completed. You can now take the quiz for the...
Okay, guys, ready? What is the purpose of the administrative safeguards? Option 1, to breach HIPAA privacy and security, to safely administer any privacy issues, determine the best technical environment for HIPAA security, to utilize organization policies and procedures to address security. Honey, which one is it? What is the purpose of the administrative safeguards? Any suggestions?
Uchinchisi emasmi?
Uchinchisi emasmi deyapti Sherbek Naimov. Determine the best technical environment deyapti. Kim 3 bilan 4 o'rtasida orasida qoldi? Kim 1 bilan 2 o'rtasida qoldi?
1 bilan 3.
1 bilan 3 deyapti nima? Og'abek. 1 bilan 3.
Manimcha, aka.
Asosan 3.
Deyapti. Yana kimdir hammasini tanlang deyapti. Eshitdingmi? Shu to'g'ri? Nima deyapti? Bumi? Yo bumi? Qani? Hamcha oxirgisi bo'lsa kerak, yo uchinchisimi? What do you guys think? Chicken. I think I'm gonna give you one more Nima o'tirishamiz? To'g'ri qilamizmi? Ketamiz. Which of the following is not an example of administrative safeguards? Assigning a security officer, security awareness training, passwords, and risk analysis. Qaysi biri administrative safeguardga misol bo'lmaydi? Qaysi biri? Assigning officer, security awareness training, ammo lekin bor.
Passwordda.
Password, shunaqa deb o'ylaysizmi?
Ha, endi eng muhimi
Administrative safeguardga kirmaydi deganida, to'g'rimi?
to'g'ri, shu password.
Naimov aytyapti, password deyapti. Hamma qo'shiladimi?
Risk analysis bo'lmaydimi?
Risk analysis bo'lmaydimi deyapti. Ikkita nimamiz bor, try. Bittasiga qilsak, ikkinchisiga javob beramiz. Davay, qani, aytib tashlang, to'g'ri noto'g'ri. Which one? You guys thinking or not?
Risk analysis bo'ladi.
All right, risk analysis ko'pchilik ovoz bergan uchun risk analysis noto'g'ri. Nima deymiz?
Password ekanda to'g'risi. Password.
Shumi?
Da.
Which of the okay, noto'g'ri bo'lsa-chi?
To'g'ri.
To'g'ri ekan-a? Darsga ketamiz. Which of the following best describes the risk analysis specification? An accurate and thorough assessment of potential risk. A gap analysis between HIPAA privacy and security. Implement security measures sufficient to reduce risk. None of the above. Risk analysis ni qaysi misollar to'g'ri izohlab beradi?
Ikki bo'lsa kerak.
A gap analysis between HIPAA security and privacy. Okay.
Yoki bir.
Yoki bir deyapti. Sizlar
Solution.
qoldinglar bo'lsa bo'lsa yoki to'g'ri deydi. Nima deyapsiz? Ikkiga bir deyapti. Ikkini nima qilaymi?
To'rni bosib ko'ring bittajon aka.
Ko'rdimi?
Xuy,
Ketdi.
qolmadimi yerda?
Yo'q, ketdi. 102 ta nima beradi? All right, the security officer is responsible for weapon, overall security of PHI, development and implementation of the policies and procedures. Qaysi biri security officer'ni mas'uliyatiga kiradi? Qaysi birlari? Agar hammasi bo'lsa, hammasini belgilang deyapti. Displaying an ID designated they are a security officer, carrying a weapon, overall security of PHI, but development and implementation of the policies. Qaysi biri officer'ni mas'uliyatiga? Qani?
Birinchisi.
Bilamiz, mana bu bo'lishi kerak, to'g'rimi? Bittasi ham. Overall security PHI.
Carrying weapon bo'lmasa kerak, o'shandan boshqa hammasi kirsa kerak.
Hammasi kirsa kerak deb mana Sardor aytyapti. Faqat qurol olib yurmaydi xolos deyapti. Qolgan hammasini mas'uliyatiga oladi deyapti.
Yo, yuradimi? Bilmayman-da.
Ya ular faqat politsiya olib yuradi, qurol olib yurishga. Boshqalari olib yurmaydi. Unless they are private security bo'lsa, unda olib yurish mumkin. Lekin anaqalar olishga nimasi yo'q. Faqat police. You can only carry gun. Bo'ldimi? Qarshilar bormi? Sizlar nima deb o'ylaysiz? Tushunishlar. Fikrlarini bildirganlaring yo'q, tushunmayapman. Yo xulosa qilmayapsizlar, yo tushunmayapsizlar. Ikkovidan bittasi. To'g'ri, noto'g'ri gapirib tashlavering. Anaqalaring kerak, participation kerak, qiziqish nimalaring.
Jon aka, menimcha shu to'rtam nima kirmaydi-yu.
To'rtam kirmaydi-yu deyapti nima? Sherbek. Sherbekka qo'shilasizlarmi? O'qib ko'ramiz bo'lmasa. Hozir shuni o'zini qilib ko'raylik. Noto'g'ri deyapti. To'rtam kirmaydi deyapti mana. Ko'raymi, shuni ham ko'raymi? To'g'ri deyapti. Все. Mana shuni topishimiz kerak. Mana shuni qilamiz. What is good rule of thumb when developing different levels of information access? Always include an administrator account. Allow users who share common responsibilities to have a shared login account. Create a prototype before implementing. Restrict access rights to the minimum necessary. Biz bilamizki, ulardan bittasi mana bu. Bormi? Ali?
Evet, doğru.
Bormi? To'g'ri deganlar bormi?
Men
Bitta. Isrog'a, Hasan, Nasima, Go'zal, Isrog'a. Yes.
Bilamiz, Jon aka.
Okay. Yetkizlar. You did not pass. Afsuskim, yiqildik. Ikki ketamiz. Men bu prosta quiz xolos. Oxiri final examda chiqib ta'sir qilmasa bo'ldi. Chunki qara 75 ta ham ola olmadik. Xohlasangiz buni bitta ko'rib qo'yamiz. Qaysi yiqilganlarimizni ko'rib chiqamiz. Keyin nimaga kelganda eslab qoling, shu yerlarda kimdir mental note qilinglar. Demak, mana bu yerda yiqildik. Which of the following best describe the risk analysis? Keyin security officer mas'uliyati. Mana ikkitani o'tkazib yubordik. Ehtiyot bo'lishimiz kerak.
Lesson 3, Physical Safeguards. This lesson provides a detailed introduction to the HIPAA security physical safeguards. Physical safeguards. The physical safeguards are physical measures, policies, and procedures to protect the organization's electronic information systems and related buildings and equipment from natural and environmental hazards and unauthorized intrusion. The physical safeguards consist of the following 4 standards: facility access controls, workstation use, workstation security, device and media controls. Examples of physical safeguards are computer servers in locked rooms, data backups stored off-site, employee badges, door locks, locked cabinets for records with PHI, screensavers, screen locks, fireproof storage for records with PHI. Facility access controls. The Facility Access Controls Standard requires an organization to limit physical access to its facilities while ensuring that authorized access is allowed, and includes the following implementation specifications: contingency operations, policies and procedures to limit physical access to its electronic information systems and the facility or facilities in which they are housed, while ensuring that properly authorized access is allowed. Facility security plan. Policies and procedures to safeguard the facility and the equipment therein from unauthorized physical access, tampering, and theft. Access control and validation procedures. Policies and procedures that validate a person's physical access to facilities based on their role or function, including visitor control and control of access to software programs for testing and revision. Maintenance records. Policies and procedures to document repairs and modifications to the physical components of a facility, which are related to security. For example, maintenance to hardware, doors, locks, and walls. Note, the organization is responsible for physical security of EPHI, even though the organization is part of a larger organization or shares a building with other organizations. Facility Access Controls Case Study. Scenario: Joanna works for a large healthcare consulting firm and is trying to implement facility access controls. She is concerned about access control and validation procedures for visitors. The firm has a policy in place that all visitors must sign in, wear a visitor's badge, and be escorted by a firm employee at all times. Question: Joanna is wondering if this is enough to satisfy the HIPAA security rules facility access control standard for visitors.
Zuhra!
Organizations may utilize security measures such as visitor logs, visitor badges, and visitors being escorted by a firm employee.
Mana buni bosishdan oldin biz o'zimizni saqlab olishimiz kerak edi, tushunchamiz. Keyingi safar buni bosishdan oldin mana buni bir o'zimiz maqbolaylik.
Workstation use. For the workstation use standard, the organization must develop policies and procedures that specify the proper functions to be performed, the manner in which those functions are to be performed, the physical attributes of the surroundings of a specific workstation or class of workstation that can access EPHI. This standard encompasses portable devices such as tablets, computers, smartphones, laptops, etc. For a conventional desktop computing device, these could include requirements to log off before leaving a workstation unattended and continually updating antivirus software. For a portable device that can leave the organization's premises, they might include
Bosib oling. Qizil.
Qizilga o'tolmay qoldim-da, chota. Hozir bir tarafga o'tkazay. Endi mana.
include limits on what can be stored. Note, a workstation is any electronic computing device, for example, a laptop or desktop computer, or any other device that performs similar functions and electronic media stored in its intermediate environment. Workstation answer. The workstation use standard includes portable devices such as tablets, computers, smartphones, laptops, etc. Thus, workstation security. For the workstation security standard, the organization.
I'm sorry. Mana gapni eshitmadinglarmi?
Yo'q.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
The workstation standard.
Mute ekanman, gapiryapman deganchidan beri. All right, so mana buni analiz qilamiz. Bob is a consultant for large healthcare consulting company that has several locations throughout the United States. Because Bob's team is spread throughout the USA, he travels frequently to meet with them. Bob has a smartphone that contains EPHI that is maintained by the company. Yani kompaniyaga tegishli telefoni bor ekan, который it has lots of EPHI. Bob calls Stan, the company's security officer, to ask him how the HIPAA security rules might affect the use of his smartphone. How should Stan, yani officer, should reply? The workstation use standards includes portable devices such as tablets, computers, smartphones, laptops, etc. Thus, the company will have to develop policies and procedures for smartphones that contain PHI to safeguard the privacy and the security of the PHI. Demak, da telefon ham security nimasiga kirar ekan, standartiga. Ya'ni bu workstation use standard nima standarti bo'yicha qo'llanadi.
Workstation security. For the workstation security standard, the organization must implement physical safeguards for all workstations that can access EPHI in order to restrict access to authorized users. This may be accomplished by positioning monitors so they cannot be viewed by passers-by, using password-protected screensavers, limiting access to buildings, offices, workstations, printers, faxes, and remote devices. Workstation security case study. Scenario. Janet was appointed the security officer for Mises Healthcare. Janet noticed that Alan, who accesses EPHI from his workstation, is often away from his workstation. In the past, Janet has walked by Alan's desk several times while he was away and noticed EPHI on the workstation screen. She is concerned that a security breach could occur because other employees have access to Alan's work area. Question: what can Janet do to protect the EPHI on Alan's workstation when he steps away from his desk?
Okay. Janet security nimasi tayinlangandan beri Janet Alan'ni nimasini ko'rib qopti. Ya'ni kompyuteri ochiq qolgan. To'g'rimi? Bir necha marta. Bir marta emas, ko'p marta, several times. Balkim kuxnyaga kirib ketgandir, kitchenga suv olgani ketgandir, bathroomga ketgandir va hokazo, yo yonidagi sherikka gaplashgani ketgandir. Lekin kompyuter yonib qolgan va u yerda PHI'ni ma'lumotlari ko'rinib turibdi monitorda. O'shanga aytyapti, juda ham bu anaqa bo'lyapti, o'ylanyapti nima? Janet. O'shanga aytyapti, Janet, what can Janet protect the EPHI Alan's computer? Nima qilish kerakki, işte bu Alan'ni kompyuterdagi ma'lumotlar begona odam bilan bo'lishmasin. Ya'ni boshqa odam ko'rib qolmasin u narsani. Chunki u yerda juda ham bir EPHI, ya'ni meditsina nimalari bor. Endi savoli shundan iboratki, birinchi qiladigan ish albatta kompyuterni lock qilish kerak. Ya'ni Windows nima bilan L ni bossangiz lock bo'ladi. Bu nimada kompyuterda. Yoki Mac'ga kirib siz buni просто sleep yoki lock qilib ketishingiz kerak. Komanda bilan L, to'g'rimi? Yoki uni screensaver bor, yoki uni просто bekitib ketishingiz kerak. Yoki shunaqa ekranlar bor, который yonidagi odam ko'rmaydi. Telefonda ham bor, haligi privacy screen deydi. Shuni qo'yib olishingiz kerak. Mana hozir javobini ko'ramiz.
Answer. Janet should implement a policy and procedure for a password-protected screensaver that can be invoked both by the individual as well as when the workstation is inactive for a predetermined amount of time.
O'zi uxlab qo'yadigan emas, o'zi haligi screensaverlar lock qiladigan nimani ulab qo'yishingiz kerak. Masalan, siz agar kursoringizni ishlatmasangiz, qaysi bir moment nimada minutda 5 minut yoki 10 minut o'zi lock bo'lib qolishi kerak. Yoki o'zingiz qo'lingiz bilan bekitib ketishingiz kerak.
Device and media controls. The Device and Media Controls Standard requires an organization to implement policies and procedures that control the receipt and removal of hardware and electronic media that contain EPHI and includes the following implementation specifications. Disposal. Develop policies and procedures to address the final disposition of EPHI and or the hardware or electronic media on which it is stored. Media reuse. Develop policies and procedures for removal of EPHI from electronic media before the media are made available for reuse. Accountability. Maintain a record of the movements of hardware and electronic media and any person that is responsible for them. Data backup and storage. Create a retrievable exact copy of EPHI when needed before movement of equipment. Device and Media Controls case study. Scenario. A company in Arkansas sold some old workstations, only to discover that claims histories of its employees were never erased from the hard drives of the workstations. Question. What should the company have done differently?
Nima qilish kerak? Kompaniya kompyuterlarni sotishdan oldin yoki workstationlarni sotishdan oldin nima qilish kerak? Erase qilish kerak. To'g'rimi? Nimasini? Datalarni. Keyin sotish kerak. Uni reformat qilib, uni yo'qotib, bu mana siz ham hozir kompyuterda eBayda yo biror joyda sotsangiz, eski kompyuteringizni nima qilasiz? Birinchi o'rinda hard drive'ni format qilib tashlaysiz. Uni o'chirib tashlaysiz. Bu ertaga sizni bank informatsiyalaringiz, social securitylaringiz, passwordlaringiz boshqa odamning qo'liga tushib qolmasin. Bu ham xuddi shunaqa, bu yerda ham shunaqa. Ya'ni erase, hard drive'ni format qilish.
Answer. This could have been avoided if the company had a policy and procedure to do a low-level secure erase of each workstation's hard drive before taking it out of service or reassigning it. They could also alternatively physically destroy or shred the hard drives.
You know that?
Lesson 3 completed. You can now take the quiz for this lesson.
All right, let's do this quick. Physical safeguards are designed to protect EPHI from which of the following? Boom, right?
Yeah.
Getting that. What should be done before taking a workstation that contains EPHI out of service? What? Do a low-level secure wipe off the hard drive. Doğru mu? Uçup da şaşırmış gerek.
Ha, to'g'ri.
Yes? That's good. Which of the following is not an example of physical safeguards? Locks on doors, fireproof, security awareness, employee badges, all of the above. Security awareness training. Doğru mu? Çünkü bu physical nimaga kirmaydi. Bu administrative safeguardga kiradi. Am I right?
Yes.
Ladies, you're not participating. What's going on? You guys busy or what? Girls? Stay active. Stay with me so far. Ozgina qoldi. Ozgina sabr qilinglar. Hozir oxiriga yetib qoldik. Давайте. Tap. The workstation use standards covers which of the following? Honey? Rozmisizlar shu javobga? Yes, right? Which of the following is not part of the workstation security standard? Qaysi biri workstation securityga kirmaydi? Limiting access to buildings and offices bu sizni ishingiz emas. Bu workstation security office nimasi standart emas. To'g'rimi? U boshqa security bor. Am I right? Yeah. I was not right. Qaysi biri ekan?
Menimcha 2.
Sizcha 2. Position monitor so they cannot be viewed. Okay. Uh-oh. Gerbek nima qilamiz? Yiqilamiz. Okay, o'tdik ba bunda ham.
Technical safeguards. This provides a detailed introduction to the HIPAA security technical safeguards. Technical safeguards. The technical safeguards are the technology and the policy and procedures for its use that protect EPHI and control access to it. The technical safeguards consist of the following 5 standards: access control, audit controls, integrity, person or entity authentication, transmission security. Examples of technical safeguards are usernames and passwords, security logs, access controls, firewalls, data encryption. Access control. The access control standard requires an organization to implement technical policies and procedures that allow only authorized persons or software programs to access EPHI and includes the following implementation specifications. Unique user identification. Assign a unique name and or number for identifying and tracking user identity. Emergency access procedure. Establish and implement procedures for obtaining necessary EPHI during an emergency. Automatic log off. Implement electronic procedures that terminate an electronic session after a predetermined time of inactivity. Encryption and decryption. Implement a mechanism to encrypt and decrypt EPHI. Access control case study. Scenario: the employees of Hando Incorporated, a healthcare firm, all use the same username and password to access an application that contains EPHI. During a staff meeting, Cindy stated the access control standard of the HIPAA security rule required that they all have unique usernames and passwords. Question: is Cindy correct?
Keyingisiga o'tkazaveraymi? Shunda turib tursin-a. Employees. Aqlay, o'tkazaveraymi?
Yo, men savol
O'tgan
o'ylayotganimda
safar Jon aka shu anaqa qilgandi. Turaversin-a shunda. O'zi aytadimi biror nima deb. Access control. The employees.
to'g'ri bo'lsa kerak, ha.
O'tkazavering.
O'tkazaveraymi?
Nasib opa,
Ha?
anaqani qo'ying, view answer bosingchi.
Answer: yes,
Keyin next
Cindy
class.
is correct. It is necessary to have unique usernames and passwords to identify and track user access and identity. Audit controls. The audit controls standard requires an organization to implement hardware, software, and/or procedural mechanisms that record and examine activity in information systems that contain or use EPHI. The organization should create a process to monitor data access that includes reviews of audit logs for failed logon attempts or security incidents, the frequency of such reviews, and the desired escalation process. Integrity. The integrity standard requires organizations to implement security measures to ensure that EPHI is not improperly modified without detection until disposed of, and includes the following implementation specification: mechanism to authenticate electronic protected health information, policies, procedures, and mechanisms to protect EPHI from improper alteration or destruction. Note: for most operating systems and hardware, integrity is already built in as standard features, such as error-correcting memory and magnetic disk storage. Person or entity authentication. For the person or entity authentication standard, the organization must implement procedures to verify that a person or entity seeking access to EPHI is the one claimed. A simple approach is to require a password that the user must enter to log in. More sophisticated approaches are to use a biometric identification system, digital signatures, or a token system that uses a physical device for user identification. Transmission security. The transmission security standard requires an organization to implement technical security measures to guard against unauthorized access to EPHI that is being transmitted over an electronic communications network, and includes the following implementation specifications. Integrity controls. Implement security measures to ensure that electronically transmitted EPHI cannot be easily intercepted and interpreted by anyone other than the intended recipient. Encryption. Implement a mechanism to encrypt EPHI whenever deemed appropriate. Note: encryption applies when you are using an open network, such as the internet, and when it is deemed appropriate. Lesson 4 completed. You can now take the quiz for this lesson or continue on to the next lesson.
Ketdik, testni bajaraylik.
Testga bosaymi?
Ha. Menimcha hammasi yo'q. All of the above.
Yettinchisini bosing.
To'rttami?
Kiring.
Nima?
Switch up to follow. She's associated with the technical security. Physical log access. Permission. Physical log access. Adashmasam.
Ikkinchisi menimcha yoki ikkinchisi. Integer of the information.
To'xtang. Bu yoqda akalarim bor, Hasan aka bor, Sardor aka, ulardan ham so'rang.
Aytingizlar. Masalan.
Technical security. Integer information bo'ladi-da, ikkinchisida.
Mana bu ikkinchisini o'ylayman.
Nima, hamma rozimi?
Na, ikkinchisi. Balki to'g'ri chiqmasa bo'lmaydi.
To'g'ri. Молодец, Sherbek. Inglisiga.
Ikki yoki bir. Sizlar nima deysizlar?
Ikkini ko'raylik chipta.
Ikkini bosing.
Ikki nima?
Agar noto'g'ri bo'lsa, bir to'g'ri bo'ladi.
Correct. Keyingisi.
Data backup. Check that backup.
Oxirgisi yana birinchisimi?
Nima qilay?
Checklar sal tayyor ekan.
Birinchisi, oxirgisi yana
Qo'shilasizlarmi?
Ikkinchisini olib tashlab, uchtasini urib ko'ringchi, chiqarmikan?
Bitta qoldi.
Birinchisi data offsite backup u physical emasmi, technical emasku.
Actually,
Try again qilaymi?
birinchisini o'chirib ko'ringchi.
Hozir men buni bosaman menimcha birinchi.
Yo'q, o'tab turing. Data
Yo, shu
Datani belgilab passwordni o'chiringda. Menimcha shunday bo'lishi kerak. Shu encryption nima ekan ha o'zbekcha?
Turgandan foyda yo'q, belgilaverish kerak bular.
Nima qilay? Belgilayman, rozimanmi?
Bosingiz ha. Turganda birov aytib qolmaydiku, buni bo'ladi deb.
Endi kutyapman-da baribir. Yo'q, incorrect dedi.
Technical secrets deganda birinchi password bo'ladi-ku. Unaqa bo'lmaydimi shu yerda?
O'ldirish kengasiga o'tish kerak.
Kengiz
Qolmadi.
according to
Uch bo'lsa kerak, nima deysizlar? Only be used for contractors.
Bir bilan 4 noto'g'ri-da. Shu yoki 3 yoki 2. Ikkalasidan bittasi. 2 bilan 3.
qaysini belgilay?
3 deb belgilang.
Hamma rozimi?
Sardor aka nima deysizlar? Hasan aka.
Mayli, qani ko'raylikchi.
Yo'q, incorrect.
Motion to be. Demak, ya to'xtang 2 noto'g'ri, to'xtang. 2. Must only
Never be done sinab ko'ramizmi?
shansini qo'yish.
Mana shuni ko'rish kerak edi, birinchisini.
Birinchisimi?
Bitta ko'raylik.
Ha, correct. You resolve qilaman. Hop, bo'ldi. You pass dedi. Endi next bo'lsa-ya.
Lesson 5, Becoming HIPAA Security Compliant. This lesson provides a general overview and tips to implement HIPAA security at your organization. Understanding HIPAA compliance. Now that you've learned all the details about HIPAA, let's take a look at what you actually need for complying with HIPAA. As we have learned, HIPAA is a U.S. federal law required in all U.S. states and territories that protects the privacy and security of patients' health information, as well as provides patients with rights over their health information. HIPAA privacy involves protections for PHI from a people's standpoint, protections for employees, partners, and patients, as well as supporting patient rights. HIPAA security involves protections for EPHI from an electronic or IT standpoint, making sure electronic data does not get deleted, hacked into, stolen, destroyed, etc. Why should you care about complying with HIPAA? We and our loved ones already interact or will interact with the healthcare system at some point in our lives. It is important that we can trust that our most sensitive information about our personal health is being safeguarded and protected properly especially when it touches such a wide number of people and organizations through the process. Beyond that, other reasons to care from an organization standpoint are financial penalties. Public exposure could lead to loss of market share, loss of accreditation, increased capital costs associated with late compliance efforts, litigation damages, imprisonment. HIPAA security objectives. HIPAA security has two main objectives: to make sure that EPHI is not hacked, stolen, or misused. Example protections involve firewalls, antivirus, strong passwords, security logging, building security, screensaver locks, media controls, encryption, standards for destruction and disposal, etc. To make sure EPHI is not destroyed and is available. Example protections involve data backups, on-site and off-site, antivirus, disaster recovery plan, etc. The HIPAA security regulations are technology neutral and scalable, which means every organization has flexibility in the technology they use to implement those safeguards, as long as they meet the requirements. Complying with HIPAA security. To comply with HIPAA security, an organization must implement the following three components. Compliance officer. An organization must designate an individual to take responsibility for implementing and overseeing HIPAA security compliance at the organization. Validate and fix. An organization must perform a risk assessment to validate their facilities, technology infrastructure, and security measures against the HIPAA security standards. Identify any gaps or deficiencies and correct them. They should perform this validation at least once a year thereafter. Formal documents and controls. An organization must implement formal documents and controls to protect EPHI that the organization has access to or maintains. This includes formal policies and procedures and documents required and specified by the HIPAA security standards. Common HIPAA violations. Utilizing a non-HIPAA compliant email, such as a public @gmail.com, @AOL.com, @yahoo.com, etc., instead of a HIPAA compliant corporate email for PHI. Not having business associate contracts in place with partners who you share PHI with, such as answering services, collection agencies, email hosting companies, marketing services, IT firms, etc. Not properly training employees or contractors on a HIPAA awareness training. Not having formal documentation, including policies and procedures. Not retaining medical records for the HIPAA minimum required retention period. Laptop hard drives not being encrypted. Technically, it is not required, but if lost or stolen, it requires breach notification to all affected patients. Not taking proper HIPAA security protections and getting hacked. Emailing, mailing, faxing, or otherwise sending PHI to the wrong person. Not properly disposing of EPHI, such as DoD wiping or destroying hard drives. Not properly disposing of PHI, such as throwing patient records, x-rays, etc., into the trash instead of shredding. Not notifying patients and the Department of Health and Human Services when a breach, improper use, or disclosure has occurred. Reasonable, scalable, and common sense. It is important to note that the privacy and security rules specified by HIPAA are reasonable and scalable to account for the nature of each organization's culture, size, and resources. Each organization will determine its own privacy policies and security practices within the context of the HIPAA requirements and its own capabilities and needs. A good rule of thumb to remember here is, when in doubt, wear your common sense hat. Keys to success for HIPAA compliance. The keys to success for HIPAA compliance are corporate culture. HIPAA is not a one-time implementation project. This is an ongoing responsibility which needs to be part of the corporate culture and business processes. Education. The more everyone understands what changes are going to happen and why, the easier and more successful the transition to HIPAA compliance. Commitment. HIPAA compliance depends on the buy-in of the entire staff of an organization. Embracing HIPAA. The key to embracing HIPAA is realizing that many of HIPAA's requirements are just best practices already implemented in other industries. HIPAA can be considered a common federal minimum floor for everyone to achieve. Many of HIPAA's requirements would be things you would want to implement anyway to safeguard the confidentiality of your patient's health records, as well as to protect your organization's data from loss or theft. We are all patients at some point in our lives and would want many of the same protections for our own personal health information. The efficiencies promised by HIPAA using electronic health records and standardized electronic health transactions have had a huge impact on reducing the administrative costs and time that previously bogged down the healthcare industry. With the move towards electronic health records, it is even more critical that we all come to terms with securing our organization's information, as it is all too easy for data to be stolen by a rogue hacker or for an organization to lose all its patients' health information because they did not perform regular backups. Lesson 5 completed. You can now take the quiz for this lesson or continue on to the final exam.
Passereme tek quiz'de.
Ketdik. Oxiri to'g'ri bo'lsa-ki, to'g'ri-yov. Nima deysizlar oxiriga?
Qo'shiladimanmi?
Ha, shunday deb o'ylaymiz.
Passere endi. To'g'ri.
Hech kimda variant bo'lmasa bir to'rda ko'raylik agar.
Shunday demoqchi edim, men to'rt demoqchi edim yana.
To'rtmi? Correct.
Continual effort. Possibility is continual effort.
Birinchisi emasmi?
Birinchisi yo'q.
Hamma rozimi?
Ko'raylik.
Bosib ko'ramizmi? Birinchisiga. To'g'ri.
Education.
2 bilan 3 bo'lsa kerak.
Hamma rozimi? Ikki bilan uchi.
Bu ham olsa to'rtta qo'shib
Ha? Bosaveraymi?
Basavering apa agar bo'lmasa keyin 4 ham qo'shib yuboramiz.
Yo, noto'g'ri deyapti. Bitta variant qoldi. Try again.
Emas. Ya 4 qo'shib bittasini olish kerak yoki olmash kerak.
To'rtta ham qo'shing-da.
Majburiyat olib berish kerak u.
Yo, olmash kerak u menimcha. Hammasi to'g'ri chiqib, manidan tashqari uncha qo'shilishi kerak.
Bo'ldimi?
To'g'ri chiqadi.
Bosaveraymi?
Ha, bosing.
Correct. To'g'ri.
Education common.
Ana u.
Oh,
Congratulations. You have completed the training and are now ready to test your knowledge by taking the final exam. You will receive a certificate of completion immediately upon successfully passing the final exam.
Umid opa,
Endi Jonathan kutish kerak.
donaga chiqib ketdi.
Chiqib ketib qoldimi?
Ha, kirdi adashmasam qaytib. Ha, kirdi.
Uch turibdi.
O'zim meni kompyuterim qotib qoldi. Ishlayaptimi?
Ishlayapti.
Ishlayapti.
Meni Windows kompyuterim o'chib qoldi-da, o'shanga hozir boshqatdan nimaga kirdim. Internet yo'qoldimi desam, shu yerda ekan. Okay, guys, congratulations. So, keldik. Oxirgi nima? Tayyor bo'lsanglar, hozir Nasibani akkauntidan foydalanamiz. Sizlar ham ochib olinglar. Faqat bizdan keyin bosasiz javobini. Mabodo noto'g'ri bo'lib qolsa, hamma yiqilmaydi-da, bitta odam yiqiladi. Bitta odamni yana boshqatdan olamiz. Bo'ladimi? Endi harakat qilamiz yiqitmaslikka, lekin bugun hamma o'tadi. Qani bo'lmasa boshlaymiz.
Bosaymi, Jon aka?
Hozir bir sekund. Mana shu to'xtab turing hozir. Mani kompyuterimni restart qilib oldim, nargisi. O'zi qiziq o'chib qolsa bo'ladimi? Zapis qilamiz-da anaqani.
The Bluetooth device.
Give me a second. Hozir. Hozir 15 minut turib tashlaymiz hozir. Bo'ldi. Ama oxirgisi bo'ldi. Shu bilan keyin okay. O'tamiz.
Bo'ldi.
Yo'q. Qani bo'lmasa, tayyormisizlar?
Eho bilan kelyapti ovozingiz.
Endi-chi?
Endi yaxshi.
Okay, chunki ikkita kompyuter bilan bittasi o'chib qoldi. Shuning uchun sizlar bilan ozgina gaplasholmay qoldim. Demak, congratulations, you have completed training and now ready to test your knowledge by taking the final exam. You will receive a certificate of completion immediately upon successfully passing the final exam. Qani bo'lmasa, omad hammaga. Faqat hamma shu darajaga kelib olguncha anaqalar bor. Bittalarni hozir bir buni olaylik, javoblarni yozib olganimizdan keyin qolganlarni ham bittada o'qib tashlaymiz. Kelishdik-a? Qani bo'lmasa, javoblarni yozib borasiz. Nimaga? Yoki screenshot qilib ketasiz. Kimdir screenshot qilib ketsin, mana shuni. Chunki qolganlarga ham kerak bo'ladi. Olasizlar yozib olinglar. Qani bo'lmasa, menga ruxsat berib yuborsangiz, bismillahirrohmanirrohim, taplab tashlaymiz hozir. You guys ready to go? Let's do it. Omad hammaga.
Az boyagidek quloqchani bosishim kerak.
Okay.
Kirdingizmi o'zi, jon aka?
Bo'ldi. Hamma ko'ryaptimi?
Ha.
Which of the following can be used to achieve person or entity authentication for access to ePHI? Hammasi to'g'rimi? Hammasi to'g'rimi? Ketdik dars. Yes, correct. Esab qolinglar. Chunki kim nima bersa sizlarga ham berasizlar. Keyingisi. The physical standards are designed to protect ePHI from which of the following? Physical standard esab qoling. Bular tegishsa bo'ladigan narsalar. Fire, flood va all of the above degani. Am I right? Yes, let's go next. What should be the first step in the security rule implementation process? Birinchisi bu, qaysi bo'lish kerak? Birinchi qiladigan ishingiz nima? Security rule'da. Endi esida bor.
Uchinchisi bo'ladi, jon aka.
Determine if you subject. That's correct. Yes, next. Which of the following are issues associated with the technical security?
Ikkinchisi.
Yep. Negative bo'ladi. Disaster recovery bo'lmaydi technical. Kim qo'shiladi, kim qo'shilmaydi. Hali kimda boshqa fikr? Nasiba Nazarovani yiqitmaylik, bu imtihondan iltimos. Nasibaxon, sizning imtihoningiz. Davay, hozir yiqilsangiz qolib ketasiz. Qaysi biri?
Which of the following are issues? Tanlayvering bittasini.
Tavakkal tanlayvering.
Xudodan.
Come on guys.
B bo'lmaydimi, jon aka?
B bo'ladimi? Bo'ldi, B bo'lsa B'da, mana ikki kishi B degandan keyin B deymiz. Ana shu yerda disaster recoveryga qotilib turadi.
Bular o'zlari hal qilsinlar. Boshqa odamda count-ku.
Ha, yoshlar
xato bo'lib qolsa.
Men Xudoga tavakkal qildim, o'tsam endi.
Ha, o'tasiz.
Avval yig'ib beramiz. Bism qilib.
Yo, o'tasiz Nasibaxon. Hozir bor cho'pingizni chiqarib o'tib qo'yamiz o'rningizga. Oshda qarz olasiz kim desa, ha?
Xo'p.
Bo'ldi. Ana shu yerda ozgina esimda qolmabdi, shu technical security-ni eslaringda bo'lsa, which of the following is associated with technical security? Integrity mi yo disaster mi? Men ko'proq disaster deyapman.
Integrity bo'ladi, chunki men shu savolni ko'rdingda boya, men esimda bor.
To'g'ri gapiribsiz. Men aytganimda noto'g'ri bo'lar ekan. Standard defines what organization must do, implementation bu true. To'g'rimi?
True.
Ya. Beshtasidan уже o'tyapmiz. Hozirgacha problema yo'q. Which of the following best describes the risk analysis? Mana shu yerda o'tgan gal yiqilganmiz. Esizlarmi? An accurate and a thorough assessment of potential risk. Mana shu bo'lishi kerak. Ana shu bo'lishi kerak. An accurate and thorough assessment of potential risk. To'g'rimi? Nima deb o'ylaysiz?
Ama ikkinchisini tanlovdimda shunday yiqildim.
To'g'rimi? Yes. Yes. The HIPAA security rules, broader objective, were designed to protect the integrity, protect against unauthorized, protect against hazards, ensure members of the workforce, business associate comply with such a safeguards. All of the above. Yes? Hozircha yomon emas, 50 uryapsiz hozir. Workstation use standard covers which of the following? All of them, right?
Hammasi bo'ladi.
Yes, sir. Who must comply with the security rule? All covered entities and businesses, any person, organization that stores, transmits individual identifiable health information electronically. Yes?
Yes.
Yes, sir. The following factors that will determine the details of implementing the HIPAA security rule. Details. All of the above. Or, unta. Hozir yana ikkita ursa bo'ldi, o'tdingiz 100%. An addressable implementation standard permits organization to determine whether addressable implementation specification is reasonable and appropriate for that organization. Is that correct? Yes, right? Yes.
Yes.
True, right? Or which of the following are considered covered by the HIPAA security rule? Company database that contain PHI, computer printouts, workstation, all of the above, right? Yes?
Yes.
Well, but that's what it says bold, right? That's imagine doctor this is guarantee. The security rules allows covered entities and business associates to take into account such as the size, the technical cost, and all of the above, correct? What do you think? Security rule.
F.
All the things. That's one. Congratulations.
Katta rahmat.
Which best describes the technical safeguards, that's technology and policies and procedures that protected EPHI and control access to it, ensuring that there are no technical security breaches. Technology to provide a firewall to the internet. Security awareness training. Qaysi bir technical safeguardga kiradi? Technical. Bo'lmi? Kelib bo'lmi? To'rt noto'g'ri bari farqi yo'q, bari o'tdi. So technical policy procedure that protect the controlled access to it. Technology and policies, technical safeguard kiradigan, to'g'rimi? Ensure that no technical security breaches. Which describe the technical safeguards. Security awareness training.
Mana shu savollar bor edi voy.
Mana shuni olamiz deb tavakkal qilamiz mana shuni. Ensuring that no technical security breaches. To'g'rimi yoki mana shuni olamiz endi.
A bo'lsa kerak deb o'ylayapman.
Bo'ldi, A'ga. Sardor bitta oshga tushdi. Noto'g'ri bo'lsa.
Men ham edi bo'ladim.
Action. Okay. Oxirgisi. What should be done before taking workstation in? Buni bilamiz. Low. Right? Oh my God, look at this. What? Emailda qo'ying 100%. Emailda qo'ying riskga.
Emailmi?
Mana shu sertifikatni shu ismingiz shu yerga chiqadi. To'g'ri yozing. Dokumentingiz IDingizda qanday bo'lsa, shunday yozing. Qanaqayizda?
Familiyami?
Davlat dokumentlarida qanday bo'lsa, mana joylar. Nasiba Nazarova. Endi pastga emailingiz xato qilmasdan. Nazarov. Okay, generate certificate class. Agar to'g'ri bo'lsa emailingiz. Tekshirib oling. Bo'ldi.
Ha, to'g'ri.
Generate bosing. Ana download qiling. Gruppaga nimaga tashlaysiz? Telegramga. Oching. Tekshiramiz. Ana congratulations. Your HIPAA security ana 1,5 kredit oldingiz, college krediti. College krediti universitet Amerikada kamida $400 turadi. Hozir siz $600 nimani qo'lga kiritdingiz.
Rahmat hammaga.
You save $600. Ana college universitetga borsangiz $600 shuni charj qiladi. Ana sizning nimalaringiz 100%. Mana buni mana qiladi. Endi Nasibaxon sizning ishingiz bitdi. Siz buni olasizda, bitta joyga borib, qo'lingizga ushlab, rasmga jo'natasizda, ham sertifikatingizni, ham rasmingizni ushlagan holda jo'natib yuborasiz gruppaga. Uni keyin Facebookda
kerakmi?
Ha?
Buni print qilib chiqarish kerakmi deyman?
Yo'q, menga jo'natib yuborasiz. Hozir
Qanday jo'natardi buni? Bu yoqda
PDF da turibdi-ku nimangizda. Nasiba Nazarova download HIPAA security turibdi. Kanalda bu
yoqdan downloaddan olaman ekanda.
Yep, okay. Bo'ldi. Endi qolganlar ham nimani ochasiz, bittasini olamiz hozir kimnikidir. Qolganlar ham o'shanga qarab davom etib ketaveramiz. Qani kimnikini bo'lishamiz? Nasibaxon kelgan.
Men ochib qo'yganman уже, jon aka anaqami. Bir xil bo'lsa kerak deb.
Bo'ldi, oching, sizga nima qilamiz? Qolganlarni metkizib olamiz. Demak, stop right there.
Men download bosib qo'ydim.
Da. Qani hamma mana shunga tegizib olsinda birga ketamiz. Dars. Давайте, ребята, быстро. Tez. 5 minut vaqt beraman, 3 minut.
3-savolga gap bo'ldimi, jon aka, ikkitasini to'g'ri topib.
Bo'ldi, to'xtab turinglar o'shanda. Birga ketamiz. Hamma shu
savollar har xil lekin hammasida.
Har xil chiqishi mumkin, ehtiyot bo'lish kerak.
Olof javob bo'ladi-da bunga, to'g'rimi?
Hozir to'xtab turing, ehtiyot bo'lib turaylik hozir. Hamma bo'g'asi shuni degan, erkinib.
Bo'ldi.
Sabirova.
Bo'ldi.
Nasibaxon, siz nimani tushundingiz? Siz hozir borib, bitta joyga rasmga olib, sertifikatni ushlab, qo'lingizda ushlab, orqangizda tiniq background bo'lsin. Marda unaqa narsa ilinmagan bo'lsin. Oq devordami bir joyda ushlab turib, rasmingizni
Chiqargandan keyinda biron joyga borib chiqarishim kerak-da buni.
Printer yo'qmi?
Yo'q, printerim yo'q-da.
Bo'lmasa ungacha o'sha print nimangizni, sertifikatingizni anaqaga tashlab yuborasiz. Bo'lmasa menga qarang. Bitta gap nima qiling? Siz qo'lingiz bilan sertifikat ushlashingiz shart emas. Siz qo'lingiz bilan sertifikat ushlagan deb ne qilib turingda, ikkita qo'lingiz bilan.
Aha.
Mana hozir men o'zim ko'rsataman. Mana sertifikatni ushlagan deb qo'yib turing, men o'zim Photoshop tashlayman. Tushundingiz-a? Daftarni ushlab turing, birontasi mana ne qilib turing bo'ldi mana. Ne qilib? Kompyuter sertifikat ushlagan. Men o'zim sertifikat qo'yib tashlayman.
Mayli.
Bo'ladimi? Любой qog'oz, oq qog'ozni yo anaqani, любой narsani kompyuterni ne qilib turganday bo'lsangiz, mana bunday sertifikat ushlab. Bo'ldi, men o'zim bu yog'ini tapilab tashlayman. Nari problem, okay?
Mayli.
Yo'q, sizga tushunarli. Dars ketdik. Hamma bo'ldimi shu yerga? Men qolib ketdim, mendan so'raman degan savollar bo'lmasin.
Jon aka, lekin savollarni chalkashtirib beryapti-da.
Menda ham boshqacha bunaqa emas.
Nima savollar chalkashtirilyapti?
Endi ana bir bizga yordam beramiz. Davay, qani ketdik. Sardorbek, oldida bor, поехали. Next. Kimni boshqacha tushunmasalaring e'tiboringlar, qaysing tushmasa. Bu yerda biz nimani tanladik? Administrative, physical, technical. Uchinchisi. Yes, let's go. Sizlar ham qarab olinglar, sizlar tushsa, siz ham javob berib ketasiz. Qarab ketdik. Oldida bormidi, none of the above. Qaysi edi? Which are the security standards? None of the above. Which of the type of security standards are optional? Optional yo'q shekilli bitta. Yo addressable mı? Addressable da nima?
Mana shu o'ylayapman mana.
Addressable. Mana shuni edi. Oh,
sorry, di.
Yeah, damn it. Be careful now. Ikkita qolsa yiqilas. Low. See. Hammaga shu chista javob berib ketavering, qarab turing. Yoki siz nima qilib oling, save qilib javobini. F. Is that right?
Birinchisi to'g'rimi?
Yes.
Ha, o'sha edi. Ha.
True.
Ha, true. To'xta.
False emasmidi?
False edi, ha, adashmasam.
Jon aka,
False.
HIPAA security standards and implementation certification. Yes.
truemi? Yo, falsemi?
Emasmidi aka? Yana qaranglar.
I think this one's true, right? Did you guys take picture? Snapshot qildinglarmi biratalarni? Ayting good. Javoblarni yozib ketinglar.
Bu savol chiqdimi o'zi?
Ha,
Birinchi boshida kelgandi mana shu savol.
tushgandimi rasmga?
Ana, so'rang bola. Ana, hozir rasmni o'rgandim. E'tibor beringlar, sizda уже bitta nima bor. Minus.
Perfect.
Security standard have important. Tushganmidi bu o'zi?
Boshida tushgandi, false edi ana shu.
Mana shu false deyapman mana.
Falsemi?
Ha.
Chiqmayapti.
Bunisi true.
Yo, bu yo'q ekan menda. Oxirgi ekzamendagini oldimda men faqat.
Mana shu bor, mana shu. To'g'ri mana shu.
Correct. All of the following.
Ana mana shu bo'ladi. Paper claim records.
Yes. Xuddi mana shu. Yeah.
Access to building. DDO adashmasam mana shu. Limited access to building.
Following can be used daily.